This is TransportBT, a podcast of BT correspondents.
Welcome to TransportBT, a podcast of BT correspondents. I'm your host, correspondent Derryn Wong. So every week, my colleagues and I break down a business story that matters. Today, we'll take a look at air travel, focusing on the Asia-Pacific region. Now, despite near-term turbulence everyone is expecting from the big T word, that's tariffs of course, air travel is still set to fly high. So Asia-Pac is already the world's biggest market for air travel, and over the next few years, we're also set to lead in terms of the sector's growth, bar none. That's the big picture. But what about the little wiggly bits and all the details? We know it's going to fly, but how? And what does this growth mean for the region? More importantly, what does this mean for Singapore's own future with its future mega airport with Changi's Terminal 5 coming up? Now, the man who's going to give us the answers to that is Ali Hussain, the Regional Managing Director in Asia for ATPI. Welcome to the show, Ali.
Thank you for having me here, Dar.
Can you start off by telling us what ATPI does and a bit of your own history in the industry?
ATPI is a travel management company, and we've been in business for about 50 years. I've been with the business over 20 years, and we've seen business evolve. We've seen the airports evolve. We have seen the nature of business travel and the business traveler evolve, and that continues to play a part for the future.
But travel management in plain English, what does that mean?
In ATPI, we focus on critical business lines. These are like shipping, energy, education. So big businesses where their employees are highly skilled and they need to be on site to do their work. And they usually travel as teams. They travel to facilitate business. And we manage the logistics of all of that. Not just the flights that they take, but where they stay, the duty of care involved in that, because sometimes they're traveling to countries which are not as safe as Singapore. So we manage that process from beginning to end, when they start their journey to when they end it.
So we know Asia-Pac will be one of the fastest growing and likely the biggest air travel market in the future. But give us an overview of this and some context. How does it compare to the rest of the world?
Well, Asia is today approximately between 50 and 55% of the world's business travel. And that's projected to grow to nearly 60% by 2030. That's driven by the fact that China and India are 25% of the world's population. The world's top 5 economies, 3 of them are based in Asia, which is Japan, China, and India as well. So that's driving this. Over the years, we've seen business travel patterns also shift with more traffic coming into Asia. More interestingly, also as China and India have become more international, traffic moving from Asia to other parts of the world.
So 60% business travel in the coming years, right? You were saying.
It's projected to be close to 60%, yes.
Wow. So that even outstrips normal passenger travel, like leisure travel?
It does for Singapore as a hub, but leisure travel and tourism travel tend to have slightly different patterns because you do head for the mountains, the beaches, things like that, which is something that Singapore does not have. But Singapore stays very relevant by being connected as a business hub.
And I recall your leadership saying that ATPI is going to bet big on Asia. How exactly are you guys going to do that?
So we have expanded our footprint in Asia by more offices in India, China. We've expanded to Taiwan, South Korea. We're looking very closely at Japan. And this gives us that local expertise as well as the global program that often needs to be met. Because we've got to remember these multinational corporates, many of them are still headquartered in the US and Europe, but they have a big footprint in Asia.
Can you give us some more texture about Asia Pacific now? You were saying, of course, probably China and India would be the leading markets for growth, right?
Yeah. Well, we've seen the exponential growth of both countries, where India has moved from the world's 6th largest to now the 5th, projected to be the 4th pretty soon. And as the world shifts to these new business lines, we can see a shift in industry and patterns. China, as an example, is 40% of the world's green energy initiatives. One just has to look at the EV sector. And that means we see that transition of work happening from Asia to the rest of the world, and the interest from the rest of the world to reinvest into Asia. And that happens whether we're talking about artificial intelligence or whether we talk about new currency payment systems. And when we see these business standards shift, then you look at which countries are leading this space. A lot of them are in Asia.
How about Southeast Asia? What do you see being the bright spots in Southeast Asia specifically?
Well, ASEAN does have to do a lot more to leverage on the trends that are shifting. We can see investments coming in, for example, in a lot of the manufacturing of the EV cars is now they're manufactured in Thailand. There's a lot of manufacturing and components being put together through Vietnam. Malaysia is doing more in their oil and gas sector, which they know of. South Korea has opened up new oil and gas fields. So the energy shift is happening. Again, the EV shift is happening. So you have Southeast Asia benefit from that because they are sectors which support manufacturing and support the assembly of a lot of these new technologies.
Right. So all that sort of stuff is driving industry here, and that would drive business travel as well.
Yes.
So the long-term forecast is still bright, but we're going for our break. And when we come back, the near-term forecast with not one but three key words: tariffs, Terminal 5, and technology.
Money Hacks by the Business Times delivers useful financial tips every Monday. Subscribe to the playlists in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. But if watching is your thing, we've got you covered. Subscribe to the Money Hacks playlist in the podcast tab of BT's YouTube channel and watch as Howie Lim gets the inside scoop on the best money hacks. Subscribe and watch today.
And now, back to TransportBT, a podcast of BT correspondents.
Hi guys, we're back with Ali Hussain, the Regional Managing Director of Asia for travel solutions company ATPI. Now, Ali, the big bank of fog looming in the near future is, Trump's tariffs, right? And there's a lot of instability there. Now, I know it's really hazy, but what is your feel about it? And do you think it could affect Asia's air travel as well in the next few years?
I think it will have a short-term effect. And we are seeing part of that in terms of a slowdown of traffic right now, especially out of the US. Certainly in some consulting firms, which as they're trying to figure out what these tariffs mean in the long run. And I don't know what short term means at this point. I don't think anybody does, because it could be in the next 30 days, there's great deals. And in 6 months, we're thinking, what tariffs? But when you look at the trends which are long term, the investments in infrastructure or energy that have already been made by India, China, Asia, how Singapore is betting on AI and technology and green energy, it's not something that is going to go away. It's not going to see a sudden shift to the rest of the world. The world has become more global, and I don't think that's going to reverse itself. As far as I can remember, from the Silk Route times, you go back to ancient history, world trade just doesn't move back into a box.
I mean, the catastrophic idea would be like, World War II. But I guess even then, trade didn't really stop, right? It just kind of paused.
Yeah, I mean, even historically, if you take situations like that, it shifted world trade. It set up a whole new industries. There are well-known brands that came out of manufacturing in World War.
The Japanese car brands, the German
car brands, the German car brands, airlines, some of them also. So again, wars are awful. But I think human growth and the desire to just have a better life for every generation means that it's not going to stop. Manufacturing is not going to stop. Innovation is not going to stop.
Apart from that, Asia's travel growth is still going to jet ahead. But we do have to wonder what this means for Singapore, of course. Is Singapore going to be able to continue to capitalize on air traffic growth?
Absolutely. I mean, Singapore has always had to stay very relevant in this world economies. And because it's a city nation, it's always looked at services. Now, when you start looking at services and want to attract talent and want to attract businesses, investing in a really good airline, Singapore Airlines, and investing in a really good airport is very, very important. T5 is another example of where that ambition is being changed into action. We are betting big on the future of business travel and going through Singapore as a hub.
How do you see Singapore's position as an air hub evolving, especially with T5 coming up?
These questions on T5, should we do it? Will it happen? Used to come up when T4 was first opened as well.
Yeah.
T5 is important because it's important to keep innovating. And Singapore, I think, by far does one of the best jobs in that airport experience. For a business traveler, the last thing you want to do is be on a flight for several hours and then spend 2.5 hours in immigration.
In the queue.
And it's not just that. I think it's not just the efficiency. I think the other reason that T5 is really important is there is a time when this infrastructure becomes older. And Singapore, with its number of terminals, has more flexibility when 10 years from now, T1 becomes old, T2 becomes old. And you want to do that with minimum disruption to travelers. I've got to say also, Jewel is fantastic, where if you have a layover in Singapore, you're not thinking, wow, what do I do for 8 hours? There's enough to do.
And that's all by design, right?
Yeah, that's all by design. Yeah. Having been 20 years plus in the industry, I can say once would be an accident, but to be on top for so many years is a big deal.
Changi T5 is a really, really big investment, and a multi-billion at the very least. And coming at a juncture where we might see a bit of travel pullback, do you think that's a risk? I mean, the projection is T5 will give Changi 140 million passenger capacity a year. I think currently we're at about the high 60s. That's a huge jump. Do you think Singapore can actually make that jump?
I think Singapore is betting on making that jump. And it's quite important because let's just take over the next 10 years the natural population growth business trend. So you're going to naturally have more travelers coming through. And then to stay relevant as a business hub, if we take just the projections of Asia being 60% of that business travel hub, then you're going to have a much higher growth percentage. So I think being able to build capacity to meet future needs is absolutely required.
And you're talking about landing, and after a long haul flight, you want to get through things without pain. So technology is really helping those pain points. I go to some airports, you literally just walk through, right? How do you see that helping travel? Will we have totally no passport immigration in the future? And does that actually help boost the traffic of airports and airlines?
Technology does play a big part. I travel a lot, and Singapore is easy to come into. Baggage, the way it lands up, everything is just really neat and well done. But that's not necessarily the experience that you get across the world. So that is something that still needs a lot of work. I think it's city by city, country by country that improves that. It's not going to be an easy fix, that one.
What do you think is the most relevant or standout technology for you? It'll make a big impact in the next few years.
Biometric recognition is a big one. It's definitely the one that improves customer experience or traveler experience.
Yeah.
Tracking is another one. The ability to track and know that your aircraft is on time, reliable, is going to land on time, and you can plan the rest of your space ahead. Airlines have already improved because you have your Wi-Fi on board has become very, very different. And that experience changes.
I actually hate Wi-Fi on board though, because the aircraft is no longer
a quiet space.
Yeah, quiet zone.
Where you can catch up on your
fortress of solitude. Yeah.
But for a lot of people, they do enjoy that. If the Wi-Fi is not strong enough to do business, you can still send a text to the family and say everything's all right. My flight's an hour late or something like that. In the other space, it would be very interesting to see how AI plays out in the travel industry and how that can improve efficiencies. Whether that means you're not landing up and having to circle before you get a gate, whether that means that boarding becomes more seamless, easier. AI is relatively new in that space, and I think that people are still trying to figure out how best to use it.
You said you started more than 20 years ago. What was flying like at that time, and what do you miss the most, and what do you don't miss the most?
I've got to say, flying right now is a lot easier. Booking flights is easier. The flight experience is easier. The choice of media that you have, the cinemas that you have, everything just makes that experience a little bit better. What don't I like about it is the fact that, and that's just me, because it's improved so much, I have to travel so much more. And sometimes I do get...
No, that's what I mean. When all the pain points are gone, then people can travel more and more easily, right?
Yeah. And that's just for those road warriors and frequent travelers who now, once upon a time you could say, well, my flight's only going 7 days from now. But now you have 7 flights a day. So it's a bit difficult to take that excuse anymore.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Thank you for your insights. That was Ali Hussain, Regional Managing Director of Asia for travel solutions company ATPI. This is it for TransportBT. Next week, BT Correspondents will be back with an all-new episode about Singaporeans and their love for new condos with our senior correspondent, Leslie Yee. So do check it out. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
This is a podcast by the Business Times. Find more BT podcasts at businesstimes.com.sg/podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is meant to provide general information only. SPH Media accepts no liability for loss arising from any reliance on the podcast or use of third parties' products and services. Please consult professional advisors for independent advice.